At the story's start, a little girl, Ziner, sat on a swing in the park. As she swung, she spoke to him about the parent-teacher conference at her kindergarten the day before. The teacher had asked why her father had not attended, and she had proudly answered that he was a hero, only now, he was injured and unable to move. Her swinging slowed, and with her head lowered, she hesitated before adding that her mother had been bullied again, and she often saw her crying in secret at night. Listening to his daughter's words, the man sat in silence, his gaze lost in the distance, leaving him unable to respond. The little girl looked up at him, seeking reassurance. She asked if he would wake up soon, and pleaded for him to teach those bad people a lesson. Out of nowhere, a fat, beer-bellied boy, Zio, who appeared near the swing. Noticing the little girl crying, he mocked her, calling her a worthless brat. His words made her furious, and she immediately yelled back, insisting that she was not. Ignoring her anger and shouts, the fatso added that he had heard rumors about her mother, claiming she had been fooling around before having her. His gaze then shifted to the man in the wheelchair, and he taunted that she had finally found a crippled plant to take the blame. Rage burned in the little girl's eyes. She jumped off the moving swing. Then she threatened to beat him up if he insulted her mother and father again. Hearing her threat only angered the boy further. He reacted without thinking, pulling her to the ground. A small cry escaped her lips, and in the next moment, the still-moving swing struck the back of her head. Looking down at her, the boy issued his own warning, that if she ever stared at him again, he would gouge out her eyes. Still sitting on the grass, her tiny hands trembling. Then, she lunged at him in a fury, sinking her teeth into his hand with all her strength. At that very moment, Zio's parents, witnessing the commotion from a distance, rushed toward them. Zio's mother, her eyes widening in shock and her voice filled with fury, called out her son's name. Rushing forward, she pulled the girl away from him and shouted at her, calling her a beast who was seeking death. Her voice dripped with disdain as she accused the child of having no upbringing at all. Meanwhile, the fat boy clung to his mother, whining that his hand hurt. As the woman dragged the girl away, she stumbled and fell onto the grass once again. Looking up at them with anger burning in her eyes, she clenched her fists, still fuming. The boy's mother, noticing her expression, sneered and scolded her for the way she was looking at them, insisting that she should feel guilty as if she were the only one at fault. Without hesitation, she grabbed the little girl by the arm and yanked her up, nearly dragging her along. The girl struggled, pleading to be let go, but the woman showed no mercy. With a sharp shove, she pushed her back down onto the ground and ordered her to get on her knees. Pain shot through the girl as she landed hard, a scream escaping her lips. Watching this unfold, Lin Feng, seated in his wheelchair, felt something stir deep within him. A strange aura began to rise around him, an overwhelming energy awakening within. His once lifeless eyes ignited with a fiery glow as his rage surged. The little girl, still kneeling on the ground, cried bitterly. Her face flushed red as she shouted that it was the boy who had cursed her first. Why should she be the one to apologize? Zio's father, his face twisted with anger, stepped forward. Without hesitation, he grabbed her ponytail, yanking her head back forcefully. Ignoring her cries of pain, he demanded that she apologize. The girl screamed, refusing with all her might. Then, without warning, Zio's mother struck her across the face with a harsh slap, the impact leaving a deep red mark on her soft cheek. The sharp sting of pain made the girl's tears flow even harder as she sobbed, calling them all bad guys. Zio's father smirked cruelly before grabbing her by the arm and lifting her off the ground. His son stood nearby, watching with a wicked grin, enjoying every second of the spectacle. The man's voice was cold as he declared that he would teach her a proper lesson for being so defiant, treating her like an illegitimate brat. Raising his hand, he prepared to strike her again. But just as his palm was about to land, a powerful grip caught his wrist midair. It was Lin Feng, her father. His eyes blazed with fury, and a mysterious force crackled around him. His grip tightened, nearly crushing the man's hand as he spoke, his voice dangerously low. That was his daughter. No one had the right to lay a finger on her. Zio's mother stood frozen in utter shock, unable to comprehend what was happening. In the next instant, Lin Feng lifted Zio's father into the air by his throat, like a scum of the earth, his rage overflowing. His grip tightened as he growled a warning. Whoever dared to touch his daughter would pay the price. Zio's father gasped for breath, his face turning pale. Fear overtook him, sweat dripping down his forehead. At that moment, it became clear, Lin Feng did not care in the slightest if he died. Lin Feng's grip on his throat remained firm, showing no signs of mercy. Each punch that landed on him only pushed him closer to unconsciousness. Seeing her husband in such a dire state, his wife panicked and rushed toward Lin Feng. She insisting that he had no right to beat someone up like this, and threatened him, claiming that if he did not stop immediately, she would call the police. Before she could utter another word, a powerful slap landed across her crusty face, sending her stumbling backward. She lost her balance and fell to the ground, unable to believe what had just happened. Lin Feng's gaze remained cold as he looked down at her. He told her that slap was for her, a punishment for bullying his daughter. A furious blue aura continued to swirl around him. Lin Feng suddenly found himself lost in a distant memory, the day of war. Flames engulfed the battlefield, carrying the scent of blood and death. Countless bodies lay motionless. Amidst the chaos, Lin Feng stood tall, his hand gripping a dagger buried deep in an enemy's neck. In that moment, several figures emerged, their eyes filled with battle-hardened resolve. One of them smirked as he called out to Lin Feng, acknowledging him as the supreme warrior. Another, standing at the front, issued a cold warning. Today was the day Lin Feng would meet his end at the hands of the 7 sons of the Western Alliance. Lin Feng remained unfazed. His voice carried the weight of years spent on the battlefield as he declared that he had been guarding this place for 6 long years. One of the men stepped forward. He admitted that he respected Lin Feng as a warrior. But before he could say more, Lin Feng's eyes burned with fury as he cut him off that this was war. So there was no need for words. In the blink of an eye, the enemy warriors all ganged up to attack him. Lin Feng's blue aura flared wildly, wrapping around both his body and his weapon. Their attacks came swiftly, striking from every direction, but he met each one with fierce determination. He fought bravely, his every move precise and deadly. In the moment of exhaustion, when blood soaking through his throat, a single thought kept him going was Ziner still needed a bone marrow transplant. He couldn't afford to fall here and leave her behind. Then, a voice called out to him, pulling him away from his memories. It was Ziner. His mind snapped back to the present. Ziner was clinging tightly to his leg, filled with disbelief, as if afraid he would disappear. Seeing her, he softened. He scooped her up in his arms, holding her tightly. But even as he embraced her, his mind remained clouded. The past and present blurred together, the weight of both pressing down on him. Chapter 3. Zio's parents knelt down, their heads bowed in shame as they realized their mistake. Meanwhile, Lin Feng held Ziner in his arms as she sobbed. Through her sniffles, she poured out all her complaints. Lin Feng gently reassured her, his voice firm yet comforting, telling her that no one would dare to bully her ever again. As he spoke, a faint blue glow of mana flickered around his hand. However, as Ziner continued to vent her frustrations, he suddenly noticed something unsettling. His hand was still weak, his body far from healed. A deep fear crept into his heart. If he didn't fully wake up, if he remained crippled, Ziner would continue to suffer humiliation and injustice. He couldn't let that happen. Sensing something was wrong, she asked softly if he was feeling unwell and told him to put her down. Lin Feng gently placed her on the ground and, forcing a reassuring smile, told her they should go home to see her mother. To his surprise, Ziner replying, Grandma had told her that their mother had to meet Uncle Sun that afternoon and wouldn't allow them to return home. At that moment, everything clicked in Lin Feng's mind. He understood now, he and Ziner had been deliberately sent away. Realizing the situation, Ziner leaned in close and whispered a plan into his ear. If he collapsed, she would push him away and insist on taking him home and urging him to trust her plan. Lin Feng agreed. He moved toward his wheelchair and slumped into it, his body lifeless and unresponsive, his head lolled to the side. Ziner, though nervous, that one moment, he had been radiating overwhelming strength, and now he seemed completely motionless. She then glanced at Zio's parents, who were still kneeling in shock, their minds struggling to process what had just happened. Ziner turned to them, her small voice carrying unexpected authority. She threatened to call the police if they dared to touch her again. Then, she grabbed the wheelchair and pushed Lin Feng away, leaving Zio's parents frozen in disbelief. As they watched the father and daughter disappear down the path, Lin Feng, once a force to be reckoned with, was now an unresponsive body in a wheelchair. As they arrived home, Ziner's grandmother stood at the doorway, her face contorted with anger the moment she saw them. Her sharp voice rang out as she scolded Ziner, demanding to know why she had brought Lin Feng back. Ziner, feeling small under her grandmother's wrath, instinctively hid behind Lin Feng's wheelchair. In an innocent voice, she explained that she and her father were simply tired and needed to come home. However, her grandmother was in no mood for explanations. Her expression darkened when warning her never to call that crippled man her father again. She tried to protest, insisting that he was her father. But before she could say more, Sun Yan's voice heard, as he was suggesting that he and Xin should spend the rest of their lives together. Ziner turned to Lin Feng and whispered quietly that the man speaking was Uncle Sun. Sun Yan was about to leave, but Xin hesitated. She finally spoke, saying that she wanted more time to reconsider the marriage decision. Hearing this, Sun Yan didn't seem displeased, instead believing he will make a good impression on her. As his gaze drifted to Ziner, with a charming smile, he remarked on how cute she was and reached out to pinch her cheeks. Ziner, however, her face twisting in offense as she did not like this man. Ziner's grandmother, urging Xin to see Sun Yan off properly. Xin hesitated, clearly not in the mood. As Sun Yan prepared to leave, Ziner leaned close to him with a whisper that Sun Yan was the one trying to force him out of his place. Chapter 4. Xin's mother held her daughter's hands gently, consoling her and acknowledging that it must have been a hard day taking care of her father. The little girl, with sadness, asked if her mother was planning to find her a new father. Xin immediately denied it. However, with tears welling up in her eyes, Xin insisted that she had heard Sun Yan say it himself. Noticing the bruises on her daughter's face, Xin's expression turned worried as she asked if she had been in another fight. Instead of answering, Xin threw her arms around her mother and claimed that she had fallen by accident. Xin told her daughter to go back inside the house, while Lin Feng remained seated nearby in his wheelchair. Later that day, in her room, Xin sat on the bed while Lin Feng remained in his wheelchair beside her. He felt a wave of fear, wondering if she somehow knew he was awake. Xin began speaking, her voice filled with emotion. She stated that she knew he could not hear her or respond, but if she kept everything to herself, it would not be fair. Lin Feng listened intently. Xin gently brushed his hair and, with tears streaming down her face, expressed how grateful she was that he had saved Ziner with his life. Now she grew up healed-eyed, and all she wanted was for her to have a normal family and find happiness. She finally voiced her thoughts, saying that if Sun Yan could treat Ziner well, she would marry him. Resting her head on his lap for a brief moment, she let her emotions consume her before slowly pulling away. Standing up, she turned her back to him and softly whispered an apology before leaving the room. As Lin Feng watched her walk away, realization struck him. All those years he had been absent, Xin must have suffered a lot. To Lin Feng's shock, Zhang Zinya emerged from the bathroom after a shower, her body barely covered as she flaunted her figure. She mocked him, calling him a poor little thing for not even knowing that his own wife was about to remarry. The words were meant to make him feel miserable, and for a moment he was stunned, questioning why she was even in his room with Xin. With a sly smile, she carelessly let the small towel around her body slip, while showing up her hot and glamorous body. Moving closer to him, she touched his face with feigned pity, commenting how useless he had become. Then her phone rang, she picked it up and casually threw herself onto the bed while crushing against her cannon plots. From the conversation, it became clear that the call was from Sun Yan. Reclining on the bed, she carelessly swung her foot, intentionally attempting to brush it against Lin Feng's face. He remained silent, listening intently as she spoke with her future brother-in-law. Sun Yan asked if her sister had used whatever he had given her, but Zinya, now sitting up excitedly, dismissed the idea. She assured him it was unnecessary since Xin would eventually be his, and she did not recommend using anything that could raise suspicion. Their scheming conversation left Lin Feng in shock. Sun Yan, in an attempt to win her over, promised to buy her anything she wanted: designer bags, expensive shoes, accessories, so long as she helped him accomplish his goal. Zinya, clearly pleased, laughed while serving looks. Saying this, she walked over to Xin's wardrobe, pulled out some clothes, and added that after he married her sister, get rid of all her clothes as she doesn't like anything of hers. Left alone, Lin Feng sat in silence, processing everything he had just uncovered. He had always believed that Xin only wanted the best for their daughter. However, if the marriage was built on such schemes, realizing that things were far more complicated. The wind blew, causing the curtains to flutter. Suddenly, a figure landed gracefully near Lin Feng's wheelchair. It was Xiao King, as she declared that the Supreme was awake. Lin Feng, taken aback by her presence, questioned if she was supposed to be guarding the frontier. In response, Xiao King firmly stated that the frontier is important, but he mattered even more. She then reminded him of the legendary battle he had fought, asserting that no one dared to challenge the frontier under his name. When Lin Feng asked for any further reports, she informed him that during his 2 years of recovery, countless villains had emerged around him. To his shock, his wife's family was among them. However, she and her subordinates had refrained from taking action without his command. Now, she had come to seek his permission to eliminate these enemies and deal with all the villains in one decisive move. Clenching his fists, Lin Feng processed the information. It was clear that while he had been in recovery, others had already begun making their moves. He gave his first order. He wanted a full report on everything happening around him. He specifically instructed Xiao King to start with the surname Sun, demanding all available information. Bowing in acknowledgement, Xiao King swiftly exited the room, the same way she had arrived, vanishing. The next moment, Lin Feng heard the excited voice of little Ziner, announcing that she had a surprise for her mom. She led her mother into his room, stopping right in front of his wheelchair, reminding her mom of the fairy tale she had once told her. When a prince kissed the sleeping princess, she woke up. With an innocent smile, she urged her mother to do the same, believing that a kiss would wake her father. Xin, slightly taken aback, attempted to explain that it was just a story, but Ziner remained persistent, her belief unwavering. Knowing she could never win an argument with her daughter, gently, she placed her hand on Lin Feng's face and, with a whisper of hope, kissed his lips. Little Ziner watched anxiously, convinced that her father would wake up any second. She imagined her mother jumping with joy the moment it happened. But to her utter shock, Lin Feng remained motionless. Disappointment washed over Xin as she turned to her daughter, telling her that she wasn't capping, her father wasn't going to wake up. Ziner, unable to believe it, stepped closer to the wheelchair, staring at her father in disbelief. Seeing the sadness in her daughter's eyes, Xin tried to console her. She gently explained that since her father wouldn't wake up, she would have to find someone else to take care of them. But Ziner was furious. Tears welled in her eyes as she pushed her mother away, crying out that she was a liar, as she promised earlier that she wouldn't find her a new father. Desperate and unwilling to accept the truth, she reached for Lin Feng's hand and tried to pull him up. She wanted only her father. At that moment, Xin finally understood. Her daughter longed for no one else but Lin Feng. Meanwhile, Lin Feng sat in silence, filled with guilt. He wanted to hold his daughter, but he couldn't. If he was going to expose Sun Yan's true nature, he couldn't reveal himself just yet. Planning before acting had always been his rule. Sobbing, little Ziner continued to clutch his fingers. Xin, unable to bear seeing her daughter so heartbroken, pulled her into her arms. She softly reassured her, telling her that maybe, someday, her father would wake up. But for now, she needed someone to take care of her. Yet Ziner refused to listen. Through her tears, she insisted that she only wanted her father and cried out in frustration, calling him a liar. Xin held her tightly up as she walked out of the room. She gently urged her daughter to be a good girl and not argue with her father. At night, Xin gently carried Ziner to her bed, tucking her in as the little girl continued to murmur in her sleep, calling them all liars. Just as Xin was lost in thought, the door suddenly opened. Xinya walked in and reminded her sister that the dinner party was about to start and was startled why she was still at home. Without giving her a chance to refuse, Xinya urged her to get up, insisting that once she married Sun Yan, Ziner would have everything she ever needed. Xin turned her gaze back to her sleeping daughter, softly whispering an apology. Ziner's small face still marked with tears. On the other side, Xiao King silently entered through the window, carrying the information she had gathered on Sun Yan. Handing an envelope to Lin Feng, she informed him that today was Lady Zhang Xin's birthday, and that Sun Yan was hosting a grand banquet at the Jiangju Hotel, and Xin would be arriving in about 40 minutes and awaited further instructions. Lin Feng appreciated her for her hard work before opening the envelope. As he examined the contents, his expression darkened. The Sun family's methods were truly despicable. Clenching the papers in his hand, he pushed himself up from the wheelchair. Turning to Xiao King, he ordered her to prepare, declaring that he was going to celebrate Xin's birthday. At Jiangju Hotel, Xin arrived with Sister Xinya. They were warmly welcomed, having been expected as honored guests. The receptionist informed them that Mr. Sun had reserved a private room, but just as they were about to enter, an extravagant sight awaited them. The grand decorations and lavish arrangements left everyone in awe. At that moment, Sun Yan appeared, explaining that he had only booked a private room, but his father had gone a step further and reserved the entire hotel for the occasion. Xingye, thrilled by the gesture, playfully teased him, admiring his influence. Before anyone could react further, a little girl dressed like an angel ran towards Xin, to her surprise as she presented a small ring box. Xin's eyes widened in shock when she saw the massive diamond inside. The very next moment, Sun Yan took the box from the child and knelt before her, proposing with an exaggerated display of affection. He declared that his father wished for their union to be official and feared that Zhang Xin would not agree to marry him without such an extravagant gesture. Whispers spread among the guests, marveling at the Sun family's grand display. Chartering an entire hotel and presenting such a luxurious ring was no small feat. Holding Xin's hand, Sun Yan made his promises to love, care for, and stay by her side. Xin, however, was caught in confusion, unable to react immediately. Unbeknownst to everyone, on the stage, behind the grand piano, stood two mysterious figures, Lin Feng and Xiao King. As he observed the unfolding scene, Lin Feng remained silent, watching and waiting for Xin's response. Only then would he decide his next move. Chapter 7. Xin pulled her hand away from Sun Yan's grasp, uncertainty evident in her expression. It felt too sudden, and she hesitated. She refused his proposal outright, stating that she needed time to think it over. This immediately enraged her sister, Xingye, who snapped at her, questioning what there was to consider. Xingye reminded her that Sun Yan was far better than the crippled man at home, implying that if Lin Feng did not wake up, no one would be there to take care of Xiner. Sun Yan, seizing the opportunity, agreed with Xingye. He accused Xin of not understanding what was good for her, reminding her that he had booked the entire Jiangju hotel, promised to care for her so-called ugly piece of old trash, and given her so much face, questioning what more she could possibly want. Xin was taken aback, struggling to grasp the full meaning behind his words at first. Xingye, trying to convince her, pointed out that very few people in the city could afford to book the entire hotel. She insisted that if Xin married Sun Yan, she and her daughter would be secure. However, Xin found herself lost in thought. The idea of marrying someone solely because of power unsettled her. Her confusion quickly turned into anger. She refused, making it clear that her daughter was not an ugly piece. If that was how Sun Yan saw her, then she would never agree to the marriage. As she turned to leave, Sun Yan blocked her path. With a dark expression, he warned that without the Sun family's support, the Zhang family would cease to exist within 3 days. Lifting her chin with his fingers, he smirked and questioned whether she truly believed she had a choice. Xin froze, her heart pounding as the realization set in. Sun Yan was threatening her. Leaning in closer, he whispered into her ear, his tone filled with amusement. He dismissed the idea of it being a threat, calling it an explanation of how things worked. If she wanted the Zhang family to survive and a better future for her daughter, she had to understand the reality of the situation. At that moment, Xin finally saw him for what he truly was, a manipulative liar. The gathered crowd, believing in the immense power of the Sun family, began congratulating Sun Yan on securing such a beautiful woman. As he basked in their praises, preparations for celebration began. Meanwhile, Lin Feng, his fury barely contained, gave a sharp order to Xiao King, who immediately understood what needed to be done. As Sun Yan forcefully closed in on Xin, a sudden grip stopped his hand mid-air. It was Xiao King, her expression fierce as she warned him to take his hands off Xin. The onlookers, enraged at the interruption, began shouting at Xiao King, demanding she know her place. But Sun Yan, amused rather than angered, raised his hand to silence them. Smirking, he looked at Xiao King and taunted her, asking if she was jealous because he was embracing his fiancée. Running his fingers along her cheek, he mockingly offered to hug her too. The gathered guests murmured in admiration, calling Sun Yan a talented man who was entitled to enjoy such pleasures. Before anyone could react, a sharp sound rang through the air as Sun Yan was suddenly struck. His glasses flew off, and in the next moment, he found himself sprawled on the floor in shock. Turns out he wasn't quite the sharpshooter he thought he was. He clutched his cheek as he struggled to comprehend what had just happened. Xiao King, standing tall before him, issued a cold challenge, daring him to fight her if he was offended by her actions. Furious and humiliated, Sun Yan shouted for his men to attack, declaring that he would take full responsibility for whatever happened. At his command, the enraged people lunged at Xiao King, intending to overwhelm her with sheer numbers. But within moments, she countered every attack, effortlessly dodging, striking back, and breaking through their formation. One by one, the men collapsed to the ground, groaning in pain, unable to stand against her skill. Sun Yan, now trembling with disbelief, looked at the wreckage before him. As all those people lay defeated, their strength was useless against Xiao King. Enraged, he yelled out, demanding to know who she was. He reminded everyone that he was the heir of the Sun family, and that this was his family's domain. Xiao King, unimpressed, scoffed at his words and declared that the so-called Sun family was not even worth mentioning. Xin, witnessing everything, was frozen in shock. Then, Xiao King turned to Xin, bowed slightly, and softly wished her a happy birthday. The room fell silent. Sun Yan felt speechless, and the guests hesitated, unsure of how to react. Then, amidst the tension, a beautiful melody filled the air. The soothing yet commanding sound of a piano echoed through the hall. All eyes turned toward the stage, pointing in disbelief. Xin, following their gaze, felt her breath catch in her throat. There, sitting elegantly at the piano, his fingers moving effortlessly across the keys. Xingya, who was surprised to see such a handsome man, that he was aura farming, that even Jinwu would be jealous. Everyone stood frozen in disbelief. Xin, her heart pounding, struggled to process the sight before her. Lin Feng was here. Chapter 8. Xiao stood near them, glancing at both Xin and Xingya before speaking. She informed them that the man on stage was her lord and warned them to be careful. Xin, still struggling to grasp the situation, remained confused. Meanwhile, Xiao smirked inwardly, thinking that, as expected of a lady, she had recognized him. Sun Yan, now red with fury, shouted in frustration, demanding to know who the hell this person was. His voice grew louder as he reminded everyone that he had booked the hotel. His anger boiling over, he yelled for the manager. The hotel manager, upon being informed of the situation, hurriedly entered the hall, accompanied by a group of muscular enforcers. Bowing apologetically, he expressed his regret for the unexpected disturbance. Sun Yan, feeling reassured, smirked in satisfaction, confidently leaving the matter in the manager's hands. He was certain they would take immediate action. He barked at them to arrest the woman who dared to strike him. But his arrogance quickly turned to disbelief that instead of moving toward Xiao and Xin, the enforcers advanced toward him. To his utter shock, the enforcers ignored his command. Instead, they grabbed him, lifting him off his feet. He struggled wildly, his voice turning desperate as he shouted that he was the young master of the Sun family. He reminded them that he had the entire hotel under contract. Flustered and furious, he demanded to file a complaint against them. The manager, calm and unfazed, turned to him with a polite but firm tone. He asked for his name. Grinding his teeth, Sun Yan spat out his name, declaring himself the young master of the Sun family. The manager merely sighed before shaking his head. With a pointed look, he clarified that Sun Yan had misunderstood something crucial. The person who now owned and controlled Jiangju Hotel was not a Sun but a Lin. The revelation hit Sun Yan like a thunderbolt. His face drained of color as realization dawned on him. The manager then turned to Xiao and bowed slightly, offering his deepest apologies for the inconvenience caused to such distinguished guests. He then asked for her instructions on how to handle the situation. Xiao ordered him to throw them all out as no one was allowed to disturb the lady's enjoyment. Without hesitation, the manager issued the command. The enforcers tightened their grip on Sun Yan and his associates, dragging them toward the exit as he screamed in protest. Sun Yan continued to resist, bellowing warnings at the manager, threatening dire consequences for daring to offend the Sun family. But the manager remained unmoved. Bringing his wireless communication device to his lips, he issued a final directive, effective immediately, that no member of the Sun family was to be welcomed at Jiangju Hotel ever again. Xin, still processing everything, remained in disbelief, staring at the man behind the piano. Turning to Xiao King, she hesitated before asking about his identity. The man remained seated at the piano, his fingers effortlessly gliding over the keys. Xiao King told her that if she truly wanted to know, she could ask her lord directly. Before Xin could respond, Xingya chimed in excitedly. Gushing over his charm, she remarked on how handsome and rich he was, not to mention his extraordinary piano skills. She pressed her sister, eager to know when she had met such a wealthy and talented man. Xiao King watched the exchange with amusement. Meanwhile, whispers spread among the guests in the hall. Many were in awe of the piano performance, murmuring that such a melody could only be heard in heaven. Their curiosity about the mysterious man who had booked the entire hotel only deepened. Just then, a murmur rippled through the crowd as people turned their gaze outside. Zin followed their line of sight, only to be met with a breathtaking display. Fireworks illuminated the night sky, casting happy birthday with vibrant colors over the city. The atmosphere grew even more enchanting. While Zinnia was charmed by the spectacle, Zin felt unsettled. A lingering unease gnawed at her, as if something was amiss. As a thought struck her, she abruptly turned to leave. Zinnia, startled, reached out to stop her, grabbing her hand. But Zin pulled away forcefully, pushing forward with determination. As she hurried toward the stage, her heart pounded. She had to see him up close, to confirm what her instincts told her. But when she arrived, the piano bench was empty. Lin Feng was gone. She stood frozen in place, scanning the area in disbelief. Zinnia caught up to her, sighing in exasperation. Reminding Zin that the cripple was still at home, she found it ridiculous to believe he had been here. Zin, however, wasn't convinced. Her gut told her otherwise. Without another word, she turned and ran toward home. Zinnia, watching her sister's sudden urgency, stomped her foot in frustration. Back at the Zhang family residence, Lin Feng sat in his dimly lit room, his gaze calm yet calculating. Xiao stood by the window, awaiting instructions. Lin Feng ordered her to go downstairs, compile the latest developments on the Zhang family, and bring them to him. Xiao bowed slightly before responding that the Sun family was nothing more than a minor nuisance and hardly required his personal intervention. Lin Feng, his expression unreadable, questioned whether she had considered what would happen once the news of his recovery spread. Xiao, deep in thought, peering down from the window, she informed him that the lady had returned. With a subtle nod, she took her leave. As Xiao King left the room, Lin Feng's gaze darkened. The weight of his next move settled on his shoulders. Once the news of his awakening was revealed, not only would Jiangju undergo a drastic shift, but even the most powerful figures in the metropolis would be forced to take action. So he realized that now is not the time. With that thought, his mind was already weaving the next move in his grand design. As Zin returned home, her mother immediately approached her with curiosity, eager to hear about her birthday celebration with Sun Yan, and asked whether he had proposed. However, Zin barely paid attention, her mind elsewhere. She was in a hurry, brushing past her mother's words without answering. As she moved toward the stairs, ignoring her mother's expectations about Lin Feng. Zinnia stepped in with a smug expression. She eagerly shared the latest gossip from the night. Pulling out her phone, displayed a photo, but she had also caught the eye of an even richer man, someone with the surname Lin who had chartered the entire Jiangju hotel for her. Their mother's eyes widened in astonishment. She demanded confirmation from Zin, saying if she had told her earlier, there would have been no need to push her toward Sun Yan. If this guy was really that rich, he'd put down a deposit on the bride. Their financial crisis could be resolved in no time. But Zin paid no heed to their conversation. Pushing open the door to her room, she called for Lin Feng. But the moment she stepped inside, she froze. The sight before her was not what she had expected. There he sat, motionless in his wheelchair, just as he had always appeared. Her eyes filled with tears. Memories of the past came rushing back as Netflix played a movie of its entire life. 5 years ago, her family had forced her into an arranged marriage with Sun Yan. She had despised the idea, but fate had intervened. Her grandfather had given her another option, to marry Lin Feng instead. At the time, she had heard that he was once a general, and without hesitation, she had agreed. But on their wedding night, he had disappeared. Though unexpected, that night had brought Ziner into her life, a blessing she had never regretted. Later, when Ziner had fallen gravely ill and needed a bone marrow transplant, Lin Feng had reappeared out of nowhere. She had been deeply moved by his unwavering resolve. Even when the doctors had warned that extracting more bone marrow could be fatal, he had not hesitated. He had told them to keep going and only requested to save his daughter. Ziner had survived, but Lin Feng had been left crippled. Recalling the pain of the past, Zin broke down completely. Tears streaming down her face, she sank to her knees beside him. She could no longer hold on. Her voice trembled as she pleaded for him to wake up. But Lin Feng, his gaze distant yet determined, merely thought to himself, Zin only needed to wait a little longer. He would not let her and Ziner suffer anymore. Watching them from the doorway, Zinnia scoffed inwardly. Her sister was truly unreasonable. What was so special about a cripple who did nothing but eat and waste away at home? Her thoughts drifted to Lord Lin, the handsome, wealthy man who had chartered an entire hotel for Xin. Compared to him, Lin Feng was nothing but a useless loser. With a smirk, she stepped into the room, her voice sweet yet insistent as she invited Xin to Love Bar that night. Xin declined gently, explaining that it was late and she had to take Ziner to school the next morning. But Zinnia wasn't about to give up so easily. She pleaded, insisting that she needed to relax. She recalled her planned conversation with Sun Yan. As he ordered her to bring Xin out that night, no matter what it took, she teased him in return, reminding him that there was no need to be so desperate just because her sister had rejected him. Now, as Xin hesitated, Zinnia pressed harder. Finally, with a sigh, Xin relented, agreeing to go. Zinnia's face lit up with triumph, and she gave her sister an excited hug. As Xin turned away to get ready, Zinnia's cheerful expression as everything was going according to plan. With a final glance at Lin Feng, she approached him with a sneer. Trash would always be trash. If everything went as planned tonight, Xin would definitely divorce him. With that final thought, she turned back and left. Xiao King silently slipped into the room through the window, landing gracefully. She had completed her investigation and came to deliver the report. The situation with the Zhang family had been fully uncovered. A month ago, their company had suddenly fallen into a financial crisis. It was at that moment that Sun Yan had intervened, offering them a deal. If the Zhang family's daughter married into the Sun family, they would receive the necessary support to resolve their financial troubles. There was a hint of disdain in Xiao King's eyes as she analyzed the situation. It had all been a carefully orchestrated plot by the Sun family. Lin Feng's gaze darkened as he processed the information. The Sun family was certainly playing their game well, and now he was eager to see just how far they could go. His sharp eyes shifted toward the window, watching a car headed toward Love Bar. As he realized, Sun Yan truly wouldn't cry until he saw the coffin. Without shifting his gaze, he issued his next command, instructing that Sun Yan's movements be closely monitored and every detail reported immediately. At the Love Bar, Sun Yan was enjoying drinks with his friends, appearing very pleased as he waited for something. His friends, noticing his excitement, grew curious. From the doorway, Zinnia and Xin arrived. The sight of this hot baddie left Sun Yan's friends in shock, while a smirk appeared on his face, satisfied that his wait was finally over. Pretending to be surprised, he greeted them as if their meeting was purely coincidental. Xin, however, looked furious when Zinnia suggested they join Sun Yan. At that moment, she realized that her sister had conspired with Sun Yan to trick her into coming. Before she could react further, Sun Yan spoke up, asking her not to be angry. He admitted that he had asked Zinnia to bring her there and acknowledged that his words earlier had been excessive. He expressed his desire to apologize properly and make amends. Bowing slightly, he apologized again and suggested that if she had any dissatisfaction, they could sit down and discuss it. His sudden sincerity made Xin hesitate. Although she still harbored resentment, she reminded herself that the Zhang family depended on the Sun family's support. Considering that people sometimes acted irrationally in anger, she eventually accepted his apology. Seeing her response, Sun Yan reassured her that there would never be a next time. However, deep inside, he smirked to himself, thinking that for now, she could maintain her dignity, but once she was in bed, he would show her exactly who was in control. With his plan in motion, he moved to pour her a drink, claiming that he was truly sorry. As he prepared her glass, he secretly slipped a tablet into it before turning back and offering her the drink. Holding out the glass, he insisted on toasting her as a way to express his apology. Xin, having already accepted the apology, was still reluctant to drink. She explained that she had to drive later, but Zinnia insisted that drinking it would show she had truly forgiven him. Unwillingly, Xin took the glass and drank. Zinnia, satisfied, turned to Sun Yan, commenting that now her brother-in-law should believe that her sister had fully forgiven him. Sun Yan, watching Xin intently, concealed his deceitful thoughts. In his mind, he was certain that after tonight, she would belong to him. Moments later, Xin began to feel dizzy. She had barely taken one drink, yet her head was already spinning. Zinnia continued to pretend nothing was wrong. Realizing something was off, Xin attempted to tell Zinnia that they should leave, but her consciousness was slipping. Sun Yan, acting concerned, carefully lifted her in his arms and started carrying her out of the Love Bar. Barely able to resist, Xin weakly struggled, demanding that he put her down. Meanwhile, Xingya stood by, watching as her sister was taken away without making any attempt to stop him. At the club, Lin Feng received an urgent report that Xin had been taken to Tian Hotel, located near the bar. He ordered his people to keep an eye on Sun Yan, stating that he would handle the situation personally. Meanwhile, at Tian Hotel, Sun Yan placed Xin on the bed as she continued to feel unwell. As she mumbled about wanting to go home, looking around, she struggled to understand where she was and questioned why he had brought her there. Sun Yan, with a cunning smile, amused by her dazed reaction, he mockingly remarked that she must be truly drunk. He feigned innocence, pretending to wonder what they could possibly do in a hotel, as if she was asking something obvious. With a wicked laugh, he stepped closer, lifting her chin between his fingers, as he sneered that he had been with countless women before, but never with someone as beautiful as her. To him, spending the night with her was not just an opportunity, it was a pleasure he wouldn't let slip away. Disgusted, Xin mustered all her remaining strength and shoved him away, her furious voice calling him shameless. Sun Yan, rather than being deterred, only smiled wider. Watching her struggle, he taunted that he was impressed by her resilience. Even with the effects of the drugs still lingering, she somehow managed to resist him with such strength. Sun Yan stepped closer, his voice laced with amusement as he taunted that the more she resisted, the more excited he would become. His hand reached out toward her as he sneered that everyone in the building belonged to him, making it impossible for her to escape. Fear gripped Xin as she stammered, demanding to know what he wanted. Ignoring her distress, he grabbed her violently, almost ripped out her melons. His touch sent a wave of disgust through her, and with sheer desperation, she fought against him, refusing to give in. Enraged, she bit down on his ear, making him scream in pain. His expression twisted with fury as he retaliated, seizing her hair and yanking her head back with brutal force. Xin gasped, her body trembling as he pressed his grip against her throat, his voice dripping with menace as he declared that if she became his woman, her life would be much easier. In her desperation, she silently cried out for Lin Feng, wondering where he was. At that moment, the door burst open. Sun Yan, irritated by the interruption, snapped that the intruder should learn to knock. His voice faltered as he turned, only for his expression to freeze in shock. Standing in the doorway was none other than Lin Feng. Xin, overwhelmed with emotion, could barely believe what she was seeing. Lin Feng had come to save her. Before Sun Yan could react, a devastating punch landed against his face, sending him crashing to the floor. He clutched his swollen eye. Stammering through the pain, he accused them of setting him up, claiming that they were playing a fairy tale while he wasn't the only one with schemes. Lin Feng's gaze darkened with contempt as he questioned whether Sun Yan was even worthy of such a plan. Struggling to lift himself up, Sun Yan shouted toward the door, demanding his men to enter and kill Lin Feng for him. But his voice trembled when no one responded. Desperation overtook him as he attempted to put on a brave front, scoffing at Lin Feng and taunting that a cripple like him could still go to heaven. He shamelessly declared with arrogance that simping for his wife was the only talent, and Lin Feng should not embarrass himself by resisting. The moment Sun Yan dared to threaten that if Lin Feng touched him again, he would not only violate Xin but also kill her daughter. Rage erupted in Lin Feng's eyes. His presence became overpowering as he took a step forward, his voice a lethal whisper questioning how Sun Yan dared to make such a bold statement. Sun Yan, unfazed by the warning, reached for his phone and sneered that it wouldn't be long before Lin Feng learned who held the real power. Before he could dial, Lin Feng's grip crushed his hand. Sun Yan screamed in agony as Lin Feng's voice cut through the room, stating that this was the same hand that had dared to touch Xin. Sun Yan writhed in pain, his voice breaking as he pleaded for Lin Feng to stop. Even in his suffering, he mustered the last of his arrogance, reminding Lin Feng that he was the heir to the Sun family, and that if he were killed, his father would never let him go. Lin Feng, unfazed, questioning what the Sun family meant to him. Without hesitation, he kicked Sun Yan's leg, forcing him to kneel in front of him. Sun Yan clutched his wounded hand, his face contorted in pain as Lin Feng loomed over him. He clearly weened, if the Sun family dared to interfere, he would ensure their destruction. Turning towards Xin, Lin Feng's expression softened as he asked if she had been frightened. In her terrible state, she attempted to speak, but he gently reassured her not to strain herself, promising that everything would be fine soon. Removing his jacket, he draped it over her body. From the floor, Sun Yan, still kneeling in pain, heard Xin whisper that murder was punishable by imprisonment. Seizing the opportunity, he sneered from the ground, mocking that Lin Feng had heard it himself. Killing him would land him in prison. Lin Feng walked toward him. His voice was calm, but the underlying menace was unmistakable as he agreed that killing someone was a crime, but he was no human in his eyes. Grabbing Sun Yan's head, Lin Feng pushed him backward with brutal force, sending him sprawling onto the floor. Sun Yan gasped in terror as Lin Feng placed a foot against his chest, his voice cold and unforgiving. Lin Feng declared, death would not come so easily for Sun Yan. He still had a use for him. When that use was fulfilled, only then would he decide whether to grant him death. Sun Yan, his body trembling, stammered that he did not want to die. Lin Feng, towering over him, made his final statement clear. There was always a price to be paid for daring to cross those who should never have been touched. As he delivered a sharp, punishing kick to Sun Yan's lower body. Still writhing, he failed to comprehend what Lin Feng truly meant, until the next devastating kick almost crushed his sausage. The room echoed with the tragic scream, as Sun Yan crumpled on the floor, clutching his sausage like a fallen warrior mourning his greatest loss. Lin Feng stepped toward Xin, as he wrapped his arms around her. His voice was soft yet tinged with pain as he told her that she had suffered for so many years. Xin, still overwhelmed by shock, that Lin Feng had actually come to save her. Tears welled in her eyes as she was afraid that he would disappear. He leaned in and pressed a deep, lingering kiss against her lips, his touch carrying both sorrow and regret. Lin Feng lifted her into his arms. Holding her close, he informed Xiao King that it was inconvenient for him to show up publicly at the moment, so he would take his wife home first and find a doctor to check on her. Xiao King, on the other end, nodded in understanding. Watching the chaos unfold in the hotel, she thought to herself that the world might have forgotten the Supreme Lin, but it was time to remind them. The Sun family would be the stepping stone for Lin Feng's return. At Zhong family villa, little Xiner was sound asleep. Someone moved toward her, and before she could react, she was gently lifted into strong arms. He held his daughter close. Xiner's eyes welled up with tears as she sobbed, telling him how afraid she had been, thinking she would never see him again. While holding Xiner in his arms, Lin Feng gently reassured her that she did not have to worry. He told her that he would bring her mom home soon. Xiner, still drowsy but curious, looked up at him and asked why her mom had not returned with him. He assured her that her mother would be back by the time she woke up. Placing her down on his lap, she asked if he was feeling unwell again. Lin Feng, touched by her worry, reassured her that he was fine. However, a wave of guilt washed over him. As he stood up to leave, she suddenly reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. Her eyes were filled with fear, as if afraid that he would vanish again. She hesitated, as though still unsure whether to believe his words. He promised her that he had other plans to take care of, but when she woke up, she should not tell anyone, not even her mother. Xiner nodded in agreement. With a small, determined smile, she declared that it would be their little secret. Then, in a childlike gesture of trust, she hooked her tiny pinky around his, sealing their promise. At Jiangsu Hospital, Sun Yan is in a miserable state, his face battered, and one eye wrapped in bandages. A doctor stood beside him, checking his condition. As he asked if there was any hope, the doctor stated that he needed immediate surgery. In his case, it would be difficult to survive without it. Hearing that his meat needed to be removed, Sun Yan's face turned pale with fear. The doctor coldly reminded him that his life came first. A layer of dead skin was now hanging uselessly, and there was no point in keeping it. Realizing his joystick is about to give him no more joys. Gritting his teeth, he swore that he would cut Lin Feng's flesh off, piece by piece. The next morning, at the Zhong family villa, Xiner tiptoed into her mom's room. Seeing Xin sleeping peacefully, she gently shook her awake. Xin opened her eyes, slightly dazed. Xiner smiled at her, asking if she had slept well. Still puzzled, her thoughts clouded with confusion. She couldn't remember how she had gotten home last night. Could it have been Lin Feng? But then, as her gaze shifted, she saw him sitting motionless in a wheelchair. Tears welled up in her eyes, realizing she was overthinking things. The person who had saved her couldn't have been Lin Feng. Xiner voice soft yet firm, saying that Daddy would always protect them both. At that moment, the door burst open. Xin's mother stormed in fury. She demanded to know who had drugged her last night. Her voice was filled with anger as she swore she wouldn't let the culprit go. Xenia watched the unfolding situation silently from the side. Xin held Ziner protectively in her arms and revealed that it was Sun Yan who had escaped her out and drugged the wine, and if someone hadn't saved her, Sun Yan would have succeeded in his vile intentions. Her mother staggered back in shock but quickly recovered. Disbelief flashed across her face as she questioned whether it was truly Sun Yan. Her voice wavered in doubt. Xin firmly confirmed it. Ziner, sensing the tension, clung tightly to her mother with fear in her eyes. Zinnia suddenly stepped forward, trying to smooth things over, suggesting that this might all be a misunderstanding, and reminded them that Sun Yan liked Xin so much, and that they were soon to be married. He had no reason to do such a thing. Deep down, Zinnia was terrified. If Xin told their mother that she had been the one to send her to the bar, she would be ruined. Their mother's expression darkened with doubt. She warned Xin not to confuse things, urged her not to lie for her own sake. Ziner, furious at her grandmother's words, cried out that her mother never lies. Her outburst enraged her grandmother. She approached Ziner with narrowed eyes, scolding her for interfering in an adult conversation. Lin Feng, watching the scene unfold, knew that Xin's mother wouldn't believe her. If last night's events hadn't happened, she would have continued chasing after the Sun family, hoping to climb higher in status. Just as she was about to brush off the matter, her phone suddenly rang. Seeing Sun Yan's name on the screen, she tensed up, uncertain of what to do. Zinnia urged her to answer it. The moment the call connected, a furious roar came from the other end. Sun Yan's father's voice thundered in rage. He ordered Xin to come to the Sun family estate immediately. If she didn't appear today, he swore that he would sell their entire family to a nightclub, as the Zhang family had no right to exist. Xin's face turned pale with fear. Her mother, equally terrified, and pleaded with her. She insisted that Xin had to go to the Sun family and apologize to Mr. Sun. If she didn't, their entire family would be finished. Xingya, seeing an opportunity, added her own persuasion, reminded Xin that Sun Yan liked her and that all she had to do was admit her mistake and apologize. She even hinted at the possible danger to Ziner if she refused. Xin's heart ached as she had no other choice. She lowered her head and agreed to go. Little Ziner rushed to her father and complained, asking why he wouldn't let her mother know that he had recovered. She told him that their mother had been scolded by grandma again. Lin Feng stroked her head gently. He leaned closer and whispered a plan to her. He told her that she should push his wheelchair to the park so that he could teach the bad guys a lesson. Ziner's eyes widened in shock at his words. Seeing her reaction, Lin Feng chuckled and put a finger to his nose, telling her that this would be their little secret. At the Sun family residence, Sun Yan lay on his bed, groaning in pain. His mother sat beside him, her eyes red from crying. In a voice choked with sorrow, she turned to her husband and pleaded, insisting that he had to do something for Yan. He was their only son, and now those people were trying to destroy the Sun family. Mr. Sun's expression darkened as he stood with his hands behind his back. He scolded his wife, telling her that crying was useless. He also blamed her for spoiling their son too much. Then, with anger, he turned to Sun Yan and demanded to know why he had been foolish enough to be humiliated by a woman, that he had disgraced the Sun family's name. Sun Yan defended himself, claiming that he had been set up. His father's face grew even darker. He snapped back, saying that even if it was a setup, Sun Yan had willingly jumped into the trap. He called him a fool. His mother quickly intervened, insisting that it wasn't Yan's fault. With a mixture of fear and tension in her voice, she pointed out that Xin was a scheming woman. Then, hesitantly, she asked her husband if their real target was the Sun family's company. Mr. Sun fell into deep thought at her words. He knew that the Zhang family alone was not capable of opposing them. There had to be others backing them. Various thoughts ran through his mind as his eyes narrowed. He finally made a decision. He would get Xin and get the truth out of her. Just then, Sun Yan, still in pain, spoke up expressing his doubts about Lin Feng, a cripple who had been silent for so many years, suddenly recovering. He was sure they had hidden motives. Mr. Sun stared out of the window, his mind filled with violent intent. If he caught Lin Feng, he swore to chop off his hands, his feet, and even his sausage, making him not able to produce sperms for lifetime. At that moment, a sudden sound of arrival echoed through the house. They turned their heads to see who had come. Lin Feng had arrived. He entered, dragging one of their guards in a battered state. He scoffed, mocking the Sun family for keeping so many dogs to guard their house. Mr. Sun's expression turned grim. His wife clung to his arm in fear. He questioned the intruder's identity and what he wanted from the Sun family. Before Lin Feng could respond, Sun Yan stepped forward, his face twisting in fury as he pointed at him and spat out his name, Lin Feng. The moment his name was uttered, Mr. Sun's face darkened even further. So, this was the man who had beaten up his son. Now, he even dared to step into his house and act so arrogantly. His anger surged. Lin Feng, unfazed, threw the injured guard onto the ground with force. His eyes bore into Mr. Sun as he scoffed, so forcing Xin to apologize. Was he even worthy? At this insult, he immediately commanded his men to take Lin Feng down. However, Lin Feng, informing him that his men were already incapacitated and wouldn't be getting up anytime soon. Mr. Sun's face turned red with rage. He threatened him, saying that he had no idea what would happen if he offended the Sun family. Then, he ordered Lin Feng to kneel and apologize to Sun Yan. If he did, Mr. Sun might consider letting him live. Without a word, he took a step forward, and in the next instant, his hand struck Mr. Sun's face. The force sent him crashing to the floor, a vivid red mark forming on his cheek. Mrs. Sun gasped in horror. Her eyes darted between her husband and Lin Feng, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Despite the pain, Mr. Sun still spat threats. He swore that he didn't care who was backing Lin Feng. He was a dead man walking. A faint blue aura began swirling around Lin Feng, his presence growing more terrifying. He scoffed at Mr. Sun's words, calling him even more foolish than his son. Sun Yan, who had already witnessed Lin Feng's strength, was shaking uncontrollably. Then, in one swift motion, Lin Feng lifted Mr. Sun into the air. The mighty ruler is now just a shivering joke in fancy robes, his voice pleading for his life. Mrs. Sun collapsed onto her knees, her pride forgotten. With desperation in her voice, she promised that they would give Lin Feng whatever he wanted. Sun Yan, now completely broken by fear, joined in, his voice trembling as he begged for his father's release. He promised that their family would sever all ties with Xin, never bothering her again. Lin Feng's eyes remained cold. He scoffed at their plea, throwing Mr. Sun back to the ground. Mrs. Sun rushed to her husband's side. Mr. Sun coughed violently, his body struggling to recover from the impact. Then, Lin Feng issued his conditions. First, Sun Yan and his family must sincerely apologize to Xin. If she did not grant them forgiveness, the Sun family would cease to exist. The second, no one was to reveal his existence. If they did, they truly understood what it meant to die. And then, in the blink of an eye, he vanished. As Lin Feng vanished, the Sun family was left in utter chaos. Mr. Sun, still in shock and fury, his face turning red with rage. Gritting his teeth, he swore to remember this moment. With a sharp breath, demanding immediate action, he was determined to make Lin Feng pay, to erase the Zhang family completely. Mrs. Sun looked around cautiously. Fear was evident in her eyes. Mr. Sun grabbed his phone and called his company's group manager, but his expression twisted into one of sheer disbelief. The manager, in a panicked voice, reported the worst possible news: their entire business was collapsing. All investors had withdrawn their capital, the bank had frozen all loans, and stock prices had plummeted within minutes. By tomorrow at the latest, Sun Group would be bankrupt. Mr. Sun's hands trembled, and the phone slipped from his grip. His mind reeled, unable to comprehend how everything had fallen apart so quickly. He was worth hundreds of millions. How could he go bankrupt in mere minutes? Realized his wallet wasn't on life support. Sun Yan peeked out from a blanket, his voice trembling as he asked what they should do now. Mr. Sun's face contorted with fear and confusion. A terrifying thought crossed his mind. If this could be Lin Feng, as he considered all of Shanghai, there were very few people who could destroy the Sun family in such a short time. Wondering what kind of cheat code did Lin Feng unlock this time. But Sun Yan, still in denial, insisted that it must have been the Zhang family. He believed they had found some powerful backer and orchestrated the entire situation to trap them. The moment he spoke, Mr. Sun's patience snapped. His eyes burned with fury as he grabbed Sun Yan's blanket and yanked it away. He could no longer hold back his rage. Sun Group was his life's work, and he refused to let it be destroyed just like that. With a crazed determination, he ordered Sun Yan to take whatever money they could still access and apologize to Zhang Xin. Sun Yan's only eye he is left with widened in disbelief as he hesitated, but his father's fury only grew. Grabbing Sun Yan by the collar, Mr. Sun shook him violently. If Xin's forgiveness could not be secured, then Sun Yan would be the first one to pay the price. At the Zhong villa, as Xin and her mother were about to leave the house, her mother kept insisting that she should consider forgiving the Sun family. She believed that if Xin agreed to their demands, their family would remain safe. Xin, with a calm expression, assured her mother that she understood everything. However, just as she opened the gate, she was met with an unexpected sight. Sun Yan was kneeling on the ground with his head bowed, blocking the airway. Both mother and daughter were stunned by the sight. Xin's mother, feeling uneasy, hurriedly stepped forward and tried to help him up, insisting that they could not afford to let him kneel like this. But Sun Yan pushed her away, and he placed his forehead on the ground at Xin's feet and begged for forgiveness. Xin was taken aback. She hadn't expected this at all. Just yesterday, she had believed everything was her fault. He admitted his mistakes, calling himself a scum on this earth, pleading desperately for her forgiveness. Xin, however, grew more suspicious. His attitude had changed too drastically. There had to be some hidden motive behind this. Yet, as she watched his continuous begging, she agreed to forgive him but firmly stated that she hoped he would never bother her in the future. The moment she spoke those words, Sun Yan seemed completely stunned, vowing that no matter where Xin appeared, he would make sure to stay far away from her. His reaction left her in disbelief, but before she could say anything, he presented a check of 1.3 million as compensation. Xin barely had time to react before her greedy mother quickly took the check with a wide, greedy smile. She praised Sun Yan for his generosity, calling him polite and kind. Xin, feeling frustrated, ordered him to leave immediately. The moment he heard that, he turned and ran off, disappearing as fast as he could. Meanwhile, Xin's mother eagerly inspected the check, her eyes gleaming with greed. Then, with a knowing smile, she turned to Xin and asked if she knew some powerful figure, perhaps the same person who had helped celebrate her birthday. Xin denied it without hesitation, but her mother remained unconvinced. Suspicion filled her mind. The drastic shift in the Sun family's attitude couldn't be a coincidence. As she pondered further, a thought struck her. Could it be the person who had saved Xin yesterday? If that were the case, it was no wonder they dared to challenge Mr. Sun. It turned out that whoever helped Xin was truly someone to be feared. While running away in terror, Sun Yan spotted Lin Feng on his way home. Lin Feng sat in his wheelchair, with Ziner pushing him along the path. The sight of him sent a wave of fear through Sun Yan. With a trembling voice, Sun Yan informed him that he had done everything as instructed. Xin had accepted his apology. Lin Feng looked at him coldly and warned that he hoped this was the last time such a situation would occur. Then, with an icy tone, he reminded Sun Yan of the second condition. Sun Yan hurriedly nodded and swore he would keep everything a secret. Meanwhile, back at the Zhong residence, her mother was closing the gate when advised Xin once again that if she listened to her, she would quickly divorce that useless husband. There were plenty of good men out there, so why waste her life on him? Her mother went on to say that even if Xin refused to think of herself, she should at least consider Ziner's future. The harsh words weighed on Xin's heart, making her feel sad. Just then, the gate suddenly opened, and Ziner appeared, with joy as she walked in alongside her father. Xin looked at them in surprise and asked where they had been. Ziner explained that while she was away, she had pushed her father outside to enjoy the sunlight. Hearing this, warmth filled Xin's heart, and she hugged Ziner tightly. Meanwhile, Xin's mother observed the scene with suspicion in her eyes. Ziner had the urge to tell her mother everything, that it was Lin Feng who had helped her fight them. But she remembered that it was a secret between her and her father. Xin, still lost in thought, for a brief moment, a strange doubt crept into her mind. Could Lin Feng be the one responsible for the Sun family's sudden change? But almost as quickly as the thought appeared, she dismissed it. She turned her attention back to Ziner and informed her that starting tomorrow, she would be going to school. Ziner had already been waiting for her mother to send her there, and now her wish was finally coming true. The next morning, Ziner was dressed and ready for school. Her mother called out to her, urging her not to be late. Meanwhile, at home, Xiao King before Lin Feng, who instructed her to push him outside. He wanted to watch his daughter leave for school. On the way, Ziner, asking if both she and her father could come together to pick her up later. As they walked, their path was suddenly blocked by a fat boy, Xiao, along with his parents. Xin frowned and asked them what they wanted. Xiao's parents demanded compensation for the damage caused by her crippled husband. They also complained that their son had grown weak with fear ever since the incident. Xin scoffed, calling them liars. She said that Lin Feng, still sitting in his wheelchair, told them to stop making up nonsense. She also warned them not to bully her daughter again. Zio's father, unwilling to back down, threatened Xin, claiming that he would make her pay. However, just as he was about to continue, a sudden bad feeling washed over him as Hai recalled Lin Feng's. A cold chill ran down his spine, and without another word, he turned on his heels and ran off, leaving his wife and son surprised. Lin Feng, watching the situation unfold, remained calm. Zio King glanced at him and asked if they should follow them. Lin Feng shook his head, saying there would be another chance. After dropping off Ziner at the kindergarten, Xin turned to leave, but was stopped by Director Yang. He was the one who had helped with Ziner's enrollment. The director gave her an unsettling smile and told her not to rush off, as he had something important to discuss with her. Inside his office, Xin, sensing something was off, listened carefully as he went on. She soon realized that the 50,000 she had already paid was apparently not enough. The greedy director then claimed that the year's tuition fee she had already settled was now being declined. The tension in the room grew as he pushed for more money. With a sleazy grin, he assured her not to worry. If she couldn't afford the 1 million he was now demanding, he was willing to help in another way, his tone leaving little to the imagination. Like every scumbag, he made his offer playfully, saying such a beautiful woman have a cripple man, believing she would understand what he meant. Upon hearing such a disgusting offer from him, Xin called him shameless and disgusting. Director Yang, unfazed, tried to convince her, saying he was offering her a chance. Otherwise, her daughter wouldn't be allowed to enter the school. She refused outright, stating that there were plenty of other schools where she could enroll Ziner. However, Director Yang smirked and challenged her, declaring that no school in the entire city would dare accept her daughter without his permission. His expression turned cold as he warned her that by tomorrow, at the latest, she would come crawling back to beg him. Meanwhile, Zio King was pushing Lin Feng's wheelchair around the kindergarten. She admired the pleasant environment and thought about how much the lady must have paid to get Ziner admitted into the school. Suddenly, they saw Xin running out of the school building in a panic. Lin Feng narrowed his eyes at the sight and told Zio King to wait there while he checked what was going on. At the same time, the fat boy's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Zhu, entered the director's office. Director Yang tensed up upon seeing them. They had already paid him 2 million for their son's admission, and this was not a family he could afford to offend. Mr. and Mrs. Zhu wasted no time in complaining about how low-class people were being admitted into the school, which, in their words, was lowering the kindergarten status. Director Yang, eager to please them, curiously asked who had angered them. As soon as he heard it was Xin's daughter, he reassured them that she wouldn't be eligible to stay once the semester was over. However, Mr. Zhu wasn't satisfied, as he insisted that he couldn't wait that long. To further ensure it, he offered an additional 1 million to have her expelled right away. Director Yang, seeing the money, quickly agreed. But before another word could be spoken, the door suddenly swung open with a forceful kick, leaving everyone in shock. Lin Feng stood there, his presence suffocating the room. Director Yang, startled and furious, yelled at him, saying he had come to the wrong place. Without hesitation, Lin Feng stepped forward and delivered a resounding slap across Mr. Zhu's face. The director, enraged, moved to intervene, but before he could, Lin Feng turned to him with a terrifying gaze. He warned him that if he uttered another word, he would cut his tongue off. Director Yang's face went pale, and his entire body trembled in fear. Mrs. Zhu, realizing the danger, immediately begged for forgiveness. She promised that they would never dare to cause trouble again. Without another word, she dragged her husband out of the office in a hurry. Lin Feng then turned his gaze back to Director Yang. He gave him one chance to explain why he was targeting his daughter. Director Yang, still unfazed, smirked and scoffed, saying it was useless for Lin Feng to be here. He taunted him, claiming that unless Xin begged him and spent the night with him, he wouldn't let her daughter enroll. Before he could even finish his sentence, Lin Feng delivered a brutal kick to his face, sending him sprawling to the ground. Director Yang clutched his face in shock, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Director Yang coldly stated that he would cut off his hand and will show him what he can do. Before he could react, another senior director rushed into the room. Seeing the scene, he immediately stepped forward and scolded Director Yang harshly. He berated him, questioning how he could dare insult Mr. Lin's wife and use his authority for personal gain. The senior director then dismissed him on the spot, his fury barely contained. Internally, he was panicking, thinking to himself that if Director Yang wanted to die, he shouldn't drag others down with him. Without hesitation, he kicked Director Yang's bum, ordering him to apologize to Mr. Lin. Shaking with fear, Director Yang fell to his knees and pressed his head to the ground at Lin Feng's feet, begging for his life. Just then, the old mayor, nervous and sweating, rushed in as well. He immediately assured Lin Feng that Ziner would receive the best education possible and that no one would dare trouble her again. As the tension settled, Director Yang recalled the phone call he had received earlier from the mayor. The mayor had scolded him harshly, warning him that if he couldn't calm Mr. Lin's anger, the entire school would fall into chaos. He was further warned that if he failed, he could consider his career over. Lin Feng, before leaving, gave them one last warning. He told them that this must never happen again and, more importantly, that they must never reveal his identity. Everyone in the room quickly swore their silence, fearing the consequences. However, as Lin Feng left, a nagging suspicion crept into his mind. Could it be that someone higher up already knew he was awake? Was it because he had taken action against the Sun family? Thinking about it, he doubted that those old figures had discovered the truth yet. It seemed like someone was deliberately blocking the news. Xin walked along the street with frustration. She couldn't understand why all the misfortunes seemed to fall on her head. Just then, Xinya spotted her, quickly approaching with curiosity. She questioned why Xin hadn't gone to the office yet. Letting out a sigh, Xin shared her problem, venting about the injustice she had just faced. Xinya listened, as she pointed out that the director was bullying them simply because they had no money or status. If Xin and Mr. Sun had succeeded as a couple, the director would have been the one begging them instead. Her words ignited anger within Xin. She sharply warned Xinya never to mention the Sun family's name in front of her again. Without another word, she stepped forward, making it clear that she wanted nothing to do with them. Seeing her sister's stubbornness, Xinya came up with a new idea. She playfully suggested that Xin should seek help from someone else, mentioning that their mother had been talking about a mysterious man pursuing her. The same man had helped her deal with the Sun family's issue. Xin, however, dismissed the idea immediately. She told Xinya not to listen to their mother's nonsense. She had never seen this so-called mysterious man's face, and if someone had helped her, it was likely out of pity for her situation. As she stood there, still puzzled, her phone suddenly rang, wondering who could be calling her at this time. Will Xin ever realize that the mysterious man who has been silently protecting her in every crisis is none other than her own crippled husband? Comment strongest dad if you're eager to find out in our part 2. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. As always, thanks for watching.